Hello there, and welcome to Roundtable on Telile Community Television. I'm your host, Adam Cook. This week we have an update for you on Richmond Municipal Council's efforts to get a sidewalk project going between Highway 206 in Arichat and ending up at Ecole Beau-Port. But we're going to devote most of the show this week to interviews in our Telile studios with two visiting MLAs from the Nova Scotia Liberal Party. One of them is from right here in Cape Breton. He's the MLA for Northside-Westmount, Fred Tilley. He also serves as the Liberal Party's finance critic and its caucus chair in the House of Assembly. Tilley has been a guest on Telile before. He's taken part in our MLA panel discussions right here on Roundtable and also offered some commentary on Telile 24/7. But to begin the show this week, we're going to speak to Fred Tilley's caucus colleague from Clare, specifically Ronnie LeBlanc, who is the Liberal Party's critic for Fisheries, and he's also the party critic for Acadian Affairs and for la Francophonie. A former warden of the municipality of the District of Clare, Ronnie LeBlanc has made the transition from municipal to provincial politics, and he's touring Cape Breton this week with Fred Tilley and other members of the Liberal caucus to try to get a better sense on the issues facing communities such as Richmond County, Shetticamp, and other parts of the island. So let's begin our conversation in studio with Clare MLA for the Liberal Party of Nova Scotia, Ronnie LeBlanc. Monsieur LeBlanc, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for inviting me.
So tell me a little bit about this tour you're on. You're traveling with Cape Breton Liberal MLA, Northside-Westmount's Fred Tilley. You're hitting a number of different spots. Why was it so important for you to come to this area at this time?
Well, I feel that as a critic of Acadian Affairs, I feel I have a huge responsibility to make sure that I understand the challenges that communities such as Shetticamp and Richmond, Arichat, and all those Acadian communities are facing, and for me to be able to really excel in my role and to push the government, and that's the role of opposition, is to basically keep them to account. I have to understand what are the challenges facing each community and in general across the province.
Now, you were elected to the Legislative Assembly in 2021, representing the riding of Clare. Before that time, you spent many years in municipal politics, including being the warden for the municipality of the District of Clare. What experiences do you bring from that time in municipal politics that you feel are helping you in general as an MLA, but also in communicating with communities such as Richmond County and trying to get the concerns there?
Yeah, I was on municipal council for 21 years and warden for 9. And I think the advantage or what it helps me to do is understand the challenges that municipalities are facing. So when you sit on a council, obviously there's a lot of issues, from even provincial issues, from healthcare to internet to planning to all kinds of issues that it should be provincial, but everything falls on the municipal agenda at one time or another. So for me, it helps me understand how smaller communities face those challenges, especially financially. It's always tougher than you'd find in, say, HRM, I would say.
Now, was it a difficult transition for you going from municipal to provincial politics?
A little bit. There's a lot of similarities, but obviously a lot of differences. So, I mean, similarities is the community work and, going to events and people who are looking for some help through the constituency office. And those things are kind of similar. Where the big differences is, municipal politics is more of an individual. You run on your own merits or the person you are. While provincial politics, I'd say, is more like I don't know if I should use the term team sport, but it's bigger. There's bigger issues, and you work as a team, and that's it has a lot of positives, but it's quite different than municipal politics.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
Now, you're here in Richmond County now, and literally after you finish this interview, you're going to be heading up to Cheticamp. These are two areas that not only have strong Acadian roots, but also have a strong history in the fishery. So I'd like you to put on your hat as the Liberal fishery critic for a moment. What do you think are the concerns that you're hearing out of these communities right now that you're really wanting to focus on within your role as opposition critic for fisheries?
Yeah. I think one major issue that I'm hearing from my end of the province, and this is what I want to really have an opportunity to speak with fishermen, is to see around consultation, because we have issues around aquaculture where they're mapping out the province to see where aquaculture, it's a map that'll be either red, green, or yellow, basically saying, aquaculture is a good fit here, not there. And then there's offshore wind, which we heard this week that they're considering maybe bringing further inland into bays. And I think I want to understand if there's been any consultation in this end of the province, in Cape Breton, when it comes to fishermen. That's certainly one issue I want to speak with fishermen about, because I know from my experience, I think there should have been and could be a lot more consultation.
Mm-hmm. Now, is that a difficult balance for you as a public official in Nova Scotia right now? Because I know right here in Richmond County and in the Point Tupper area, there's been some massive moves in terms of offshore wind. 2 companies have set up shop in Point Tupper. Yeah. A third that was already there is getting approval as we speak for developing their own offshore wind setup, looking at green hydrogen and green ammonia. Yeah. So we found out this week in the report that you referenced that some of these turbines could actually exceed the height of the Statue of Liberty as kind of a comparison there. So how difficult is it for you, not even just in terms of consulting with fishermen's groups, but also striking that balance between protecting the fish habitat, but also developing the economy and the new green economy that we're looking at?
And I think both can be done. It's not one or the other. It's just to do that, you have to make sure that all the stakeholders are at the table and they have an opportunity to voice their opinions. And as fisheries critic, part of my role is to make sure that the fisheries organizations, the fishermen, fisherwomen, have an opportunity to have a say, because, nobody's really, from my understanding, when I speak to fishermen, against offshore wind. It's where is it going to be and what are the impacts on the industry? Because the fishing industry is a major industry, major employer for many rural communities, and without fishing, a lot of communities would be in very, very difficult situations. So yes, I think both can be achieved, but it comes back to communication and really taking the time to do it right.
Mm-hmm. Now, in that spirit, you mentioned to me just before we got going that you're going to be having consultation meetings a little later on this year with the Richmond County Inshore Fishermen's Association. So you'll be coming back here later on in the summer, early in the fall to set that up. What's been the communication like for you with fishing interests here in Richmond County? What's that been like?
I was a counselor, but I was also a fisherman, so I worked on the lobster boats for 31 years, so I understand the industry, and I think I feel comfortable in that environment, so I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to reach out to those organizations and fishermen and have those discussions, and I was really looking forward to this trip. And so tomorrow in Cheticamp, I'm going to head out with some fishermen to get the experience of what's going on here.
What's your sense, just while we're on this topic, of how the lobster season is going this year in terms of catches and prices? What are you hearing?
I know in our end of the province, the prices was fairly good at the beginning of the season, but as the season wound down, catches were lower than usual, like April, May. Part of that is, I'm hearing, is the temperature of the water, because that always affects catches. And the temperature was a lot warmer, in the beginning of the season, so catches were maybe up a little bit. So that was the offset. But there are long-term challenges when it comes to the fishery, I think, with, as waters warm and, more effort. That's why it's important to try to limit the amount of effort that there is to where we're at now. So there are challenges, but it is a strong industry, no question.
All right, well, we'll hope for the best there as the season rolls along. I wanted to ask you a couple of questions regarding your role as the Liberal opposition critic for Acadian Affairs and for La Francophonie. The last time you and I got to speak, about a year ago, we were looking at a bill that you had introduced as the MLA for Clare regarding consultations with the Francophone School Board, the Conseil scolaire acadien provincial, to give this body more autonomy and to make sure that French language education would be enshrined in Nova Scotia as an integral right for the people of the province. Yeah. What can you tell me about where that's gone and where that conversation is now?
So I've been speaking with the CSAP, and from my understanding, they are having meetings with the Department of Education, so they're trying to work through the challenges around passing that bill. So my hope, and I mean, we'll see as the session moves forward, but my hope is that they will bring that forward. In the end, it's about French language education. So regardless of who brings it forward, I think it's extremely important that it is brought forward. So as critic, my role is to keep pushing on that and to make sure that they understand the importance of it, the government.
Now, you had introduced the bill, and the Liberal Party, while in government, had been having these conversations with the CSAP to develop this bill. An old saying goes, success has many fathers, while failure is an orphan. Yeah. With that in mind, are you basically at the point now where you would be happy to see that progress happen no matter who happens to get the credit?
Well, I think as critic, my role is to make sure that, the French language, there's a strong push to make it stronger, that it makes sure it survives in our province. So, I mean, I hope they bring something forward, and I hope they bring something forward that's quite similar or to the bill that we tabled, because I think what we tabled was a good, solid bill. Mm-hmm. So I am concerned that it's taking a lot of time through discussions with the CSAP to come forward with a bill. But I'm looking forward to seeing what that bill actually looks like, and that's where, once we see the details of it, then as a critic, that's my role to point out where it could be made stronger. But ultimately, I hope that it's a strong bill.
Now, seeing how the New Brunswick PC government has dealt with French immersion to the point of, some are saying in that province, really watering down the state of French immersion over there, and in Canada's only bilingual province, no less. Does this bill getting passed and made into law help to protect Nova Scotia from going down that same road, or even just help protect the Nova Scotia government from going down that same road?
I would say yes. I mean, it does give more autonomy to the CSAP, which I think is important. And it will make sure that some people within the Department of Education, it'll strengthen the French aspect. So a lot of the discussions I had with the CSAP is a lot of, if any communications coming from the Department of Education is all in English, like there could be a lot of improvements through the bill where a lot of those communications come to the schools or the CSAP in French. So right now the CSAP is somewhat at a disadvantage, so that when they receive communications or documentation from the department, then they have to turn around and translate it themselves. So there are issues there that would strengthen the language and the French education in Nova Scotia for sure.
Okay. Now, as important as this issue is, you are obviously the critic for Acadian Affairs and for La Francophonie, taking a look at French language and French cultural issues around the province. Just overall, what's your sense of how the language and the culture are doing right now, and what, if anything, would help it along in the years to come?
I'd like to see a stronger push for French language services. I am concerned, to be honest. Like, I know the government could be providing a little bit more support when it comes to government positions, to assure that, if there are government employees in Acadian ridings, that there's a certain level of French language services there, that they speak French. I think the cultural communities I know are quite strong, and that's across the province. So that does help, and they try to keep the government to account in all levels of government. But as critic, I really feel that my role is to try to, push French language services, to try to show the importance of it. That's one area I find that, being from an Acadian riding and being an Acadian in the legislature, you have a better understanding of what it is to live in a minority community. Sometimes people forget that there are still people in our ridings that, although they do understand and speak some English, they're not 100% comfortable or don't always understand 100%. So you need that level of service to assure that everybody gets taken care of when it comes to services.
And in that spirit, you mentioned the idea of minority ridings in terms of protecting the French language. Your riding, Clare, much like this riding, Richmond, was combined with other nearby parts of the community in previous ridings over a 2-term period. They're now back to their original format. How do you feel things have improved in terms of having these minority ridings in Richmond and in Clare and in other parts of the province?
Well, it gives an opportunity for Acadians to vote for someone who represents them. In my case, and the previous MLA, Gordon Wilson, which I did love, and he's a good friend of mine. So he did a great job. It's not to say that he wasn't a good MLA. I think he was a great MLA. But at the same time, it's difficult to understand the challenges that Acadians are facing, around, if it's language, services, cultural challenges. So it does make a huge difference to have an Acadian representative in the House that can bring those ideas forward.
Mm-hmm. Our viewers may or may not know that there's also a battle to have a portion of the Inverness riding, specifically Cheticamp, as its own riding. That is now going through the Nova Scotia court system, as did the previous challenge by the Fédération Acadienne de la Nouvelle-Écosse to return to minority ridings. Obviously, you can't speak too much to this as it's going through the courts, but what are your thoughts about Cheticamp and their battle there?
I 100% understand how they're feeling and why they're taking this approach. It is important, as Acadians to have that representation. It is in court, and I think that's a good way to go about it because it takes the politics out of it. Because as we've seen in the past, it became quite contentious. So I think the fact that it is, like our ridings were reinstated due to a court challenge, and I think that takes the politics out of it completely. So I think they're going in the right direction, and I do understand their desire to have their own riding.
Last question to you, Ronnie LeBlanc. You could have run under any party banner when you decided to run for provincial politics. You chose the Liberal Party, and you became the MLA at a time when there was a transfer of power happening between the Liberal Party to the PC government of Tim Houston. But that being said, you spoke of a team sport feeling for provincial politics as opposed to municipal politics just a few moments ago. What's your sense on how the Liberal team is doing and where you go from here, both individually and as a party as we head into the next stage of this government term?
Yeah, I feel pretty good. I think the Liberal Party, our caucus and under Zach's leadership, I think we're focusing on what I believe are the right issues, like affordability, housing, making sure people are taken care of, because with inflation, there are a lot of people that are struggling, and those are the issues I feel that Zach as the leader and our caucus is really focusing on. So I feel we're speaking to the right issues to the public, and I think we're going in the right direction.
All right, we've covered a lot of ground in a short time, as I thought we might.
Yeah.
Did you have anything else you wanted to add about any of this just before we wrap up?
No, I just want to say I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm really pleased that to have Fred Tilley, the MLA from Northside-Westmount, accompany me. I know he's a strong advocate for Cape Breton, as is Derek Montbourquette, the MLA for Sydney member too. They're both passionate about Cape Breton. I see that firsthand. So it's going to be great to go around with Fred and really get a strong sense of what Cape Breton has to offer, and I'm sure I'm going to learn a lot.
Well, we wish you safe travels, and in particular, we want to thank you for giving us an opportunity to speak to you, and personally for me, an opportunity to speak to you in person as opposed through a computer screen. So thank you so much, MLA Ronnie LeBlanc, for joining me here at Telile Community Television.
Thank you.
Coming up this summer on Telile Community Television, stay tuned for a special studio interview featuring Nova Scotia Premier Tim Houston and Richmond PC MLA Trevor Boudreau. We'll also have a studio interview with the leader of the Nova Scotia Liberal Party and the official opposition leader for Nova Scotia, Zach Churchill. Let's take a break from provincial politics for a moment to talk about municipal politics, specifically Richmond Municipal Council's efforts to get sidewalks established on a short road that leads from Highway 206 through Arichat and ends up at the entrance-exit portion of Ecole Beau-Port, passing by the Richmond Municipal Building as it goes. Council has been working with the Conseil Scolaire Acadien Provincial, the CSAP, to try to get cooperation between the school board and the municipality in terms of having this sidewalk project take place. But at this week's Committee of the Whole meeting of Richmond Municipal Council, Warden Amanda Mumbrequette gave an update of a meeting that she and Richmond CAO Troy McCulloch had with the Executive Director of the CSAP, Michelle Collette. Coming out of that meeting, it's looking now like discussions on getting a sidewalk extension up to Ecole Beau-Port will begin in earnest later this fall or early in 2024. However, there's still a possibility that Richmond Municipal Council could go ahead with another sidewalk extension that would be taking place on the road heading south from Ecole Beau-Port back down to Highway 206. Let's go to some footage from the Committee of the Whole meeting that saw this issue arise. We begin by hearing from Richmond Warden Amanda Mumbrequette.
Troy and I met with Michelle Collette, who is the General Manager for the CSAP head office. There's going to be some significant work because it's already been improved up at Ecole Beau-Port starting this summer. They've received some funds to prolong the life of the building. It's mostly exterior work. They have some paving approved, but not specifically on the driveway. And so the work that they've got planned for this fiscal year doesn't really align with what we were talking about at council. So you'll remember the options. We presented 3 of them to the CSAP folks, and it was first to support sidewalk-only development, second to support sidewalk and paving, and then the third to support also the paving on the exit driveway. And so we talked about all 3 of those options. The bottom line is their budget this year has already been allocated and planned. They are, however, now planning for 2024-25. They had already started to discuss a sidewalk pedestrian connection from the school on this side to Highway 206. So this was what they referred to in their letter. They just were not planning it for this specific year, looking at it as more of a next year project. You know, I will tell you, it was a great conversation. Mr. Collette was very interested in partnering with the municipality. He did indicate that the exit driveway project would probably not be something that they would be interested in partnering on, because I think, like us, very focused on the safety and the active transportation and accessibility piece for the school. They're looking to work with us on a plan for 2024-2025. And so I know from our discussion, it sounds like they have an internal process that they use to identify which projects come up as a priority for infrastructure, but he felt strongly that this would be a great one. And I think particularly, you know, because they're already considering this work now, and of course that now we would have a willing partner in Richmond County to work with. So his suggestion was that we meet in January to work through a specific project and to create a plan for the next fiscal. He couldn't specifically commit to the 50%, which we had suggested in the letter, because I think the way that their budgets are, work is just like ours. They would do a specific amount. He said, it's not going to be kind of a lowball discussion, but it might be 47, or it might be 40, you know what I mean? Or it might be whatever percentage, but it would be a specific amount that they would allocate for a specific project, not a percentage, which is totally reasonable. That's how we budget as well. So, also important to note that this work, in his mind, did not need to be done in July and August. And in fact, he discouraged that because I believe from a school perspective, from a school board perspective, when they have internal projects that need to be done in schools, they use the summer months to get those projects done, because they're the kinds of projects that can't be done with students in the building oftentimes. And so they'll often do external projects like paving, like the kind of work we're talking about here, in sort of the fall time frame or the spring time frame. And the example he gave was that they repaved the parking lot at the Sydney School in October, I think. So this would be of last year. So this would be something that they would look at doing most likely during the school year. I think that sums up the gist of the conversation. Actions I guess I would suggest after talking with him is, I still think we want to maybe speak with local school officials here and talk about what we could do to help to mitigate some safety concerns for this year. But I think in the meantime, perhaps we consider looking at the exit driveway. We've budgeted that in our operating budget. As you'll recall, it's not part of our, it's part of our 5-year capital plan, but it's specifically we have operating funds a set aside for that project. So maybe we could look at, doing that, going ahead with that project and talking with the school and maybe, I don't know if there is an opportunity to widen the driveway a little bit or to put some signage on it or whatever the case may be.
This one over here?
Yeah, to help with some safety concerns. And if this was done in advance of the project next year on this side, it would make mitigating that traffic flow a whole lot easier because you have a higher quality pavement there, right? So just some discussions, I guess some for consideration. And I just open this for comment or suggestions from council at this point. So, Councillor Sean Sampson, I'm going to start with you because I know this was close to your
this is
heart.
dear to my heart. Yeah. So, I mean, and for me to see this done sooner, sooner the better, right? And this is all positive information, Madam Warden and CEO. Thank you for having that meeting with Michelle Collette. I mean, this is all positive. So, I guess we're looking at January of 2024 to have this discussion when it comes to the CSAP's budget, and so hopefully we can see some of this side come to fruition in the spring of 2024 and try to get it done ASAP. I totally agree with you, Madam Warden, that if it's not going to be done during the summer months and it's going to be done during the school season, maybe we take our budgeted amount and we do try to fix the exit driveway, maybe widen that up. If it's possible
If
to
it's
widen
even
it up,
possible,
right?
that's right. we would have to
Because
check.
again, if they're gonna be using that as a two-way traffic driveway, because we're gonna be working on this side, then, whatever we can do to fix that side first, I guess, would be the initial plan and the number one step, I would say. So,
Okay.
I'd be,
Yeah, my
Thanks,
only thought
Councillor
would be,
Sampson.
I guess, in conjunction with what they would think of how, and Public Works here, obviously, how that could be planned, because maybe there's, as we discussed in the past, there may be a cost savings to do that paving project on both sides at the same time, but maybe it does make more sense to do it separately to allow for that, to be sort of everything in good shape there while this is worked on.
Yeah.
So I think I'd be open to either way, depending what works.
Melanie Sampson?
Yeah, as you were giving your update, what you sort of suggested was exactly where my mind was going as well. Like, obviously, given their positive attitude towards participating with us on the side of the building, I think, we hold off until we have those conversations with them in January to finalize that plan. And where we already have the exit driveway budgeted. I mean, I guess what I would suggest here is, now we've kind of passed, number one, we have a quote, we've asked for quotes, which included all the parts, and so that may change what that price looks like. There may be a lot of pieces, of course, the Director of Public Works might find out as he kind of goes back to the
Yes.
to the contractor to see what the situation is, but my feeling would be that we do now, that our that our attitude is to do it. And we just need to revisit to make sure the numbers still work.
Okay.
But I would be in favor of proceeding this year if the numbers still work.
On the exit side.
On the exit side, yeah.
Councillor Digdon, would you like an opportunity?
I agree with moving forward with the, definitely the exit side. My only concern would be, if the meeting in January tends to have a different spin. Then,
Cross that bridge when we come to it, I
Yeah.
think,
yeah,
right?
I would hope we cross the bridge though, I guess would be my point. Because I do know part of the concern was spending that much on a complete project. So if we put the cart before we go with the horse, then I would just hope that we're gonna buy the horse when it's time to do so. That would be one concern. My second one would be for paving. I hope we go with an accredited paving company, and I only say that because, I do know that there's a company in, Sobeys got their parking lot done and now has issues.
Yeah.
So just,
Yeah.
again.
Yeah, I'm sure that staff will take that under
Yes.
consideration, but it's a good
And yeah,
flag.
and not my
Yeah.
bag to
Expertise,
shake, but I just,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a good flag, yeah. Okay. I think at the end of the day then, just to ensure that we give, I don't know, Troy, would you like to speak to this? I'm trying to figure out a motion that will give staff the most flexibility in
Right.
terms of communicating with the contractor, finding out information, deciding on what the best course of action is.
Just refer it back to us to come back with options at your council meeting at the earliest possible.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Is that possible by our regular council meeting? I'm just recognizing that we're going to break for summer, and I think that's too quick. So Deputy Warden?
If we wanted to proceed, I mean, maybe there's an option to do a virtual meeting,
Right.
special meeting, call a special meeting. It'd be
Yeah.
virtual, whether or not, you know what I mean, if anybody is not around at that time. That way we're, yeah.
There's the possibility of it being done in the late summer, fall, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just to give staff that
Yeah.
freedom to work on it right away, and if we can help with moving along.
Exactly.
so be it. Yeah.
Perfect.
Would that be acceptable?
That's acceptable.
Okay, so the motion will be to refer the matter back to staff to look at options for the exit driveway for this coming year. And then we will regroup as a council in a special meeting when the time comes.
So would we be actually saying like that they're gonna put out a request for proposals again? Like,
I think we would leave that, if we could leave that flexibility with staff.
Okay,
You
yep,
can
that's
just
fine.
determine how you would best proceed.
We heard what you're trying to achieve, so we'll use that scope and go from there.
And I'm assuming if it, like, possibly our budgeting may have been low if it was an add-on to that, but if for some reason
Yeah,
it came in within the budgeted amount, we don't have to be consulted anymore after this point then, right?
Yeah.
Like, we've already approved this. Yeah.
well, there is paving happening up there and,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
the company who may be doing it may look at that as an add-on to that.
right.
Right?
So it might,
It's
you
happened
never
in the
know.
past that we've been able to
Exactly.
make things like that work, so.
Yeah.
We'll leave that
Okay.
in staff's hands.
Great, okay,
Thank you.
so the motion is to refer the matter back to staff to come up with some options for proceeding with the exit driveway. Could I have a mover on that, please?
Make a motion.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Sean Sampson.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Councillor Mike Digdon. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, that motion is carried.
And now we're pleased to have on Telile Community Television someone who's been a participant in our programs in the past via Zoom, both on Telile 24/7 and as a member of our MLA Roundtables on our Roundtable series. He is the Northside-Westmount MLA, and he also serves as the Liberal Party Caucus Chair and the party's finance critic. So we're pleased to welcome to our Telile studios in Arichat, Fred Tilley. Thank you for joining me here today, Fred.
Well, thank you, Adam. It's a pleasure to be here. Really excited to be here with you today.
We're glad to have you here, and part of the reason that you are here is because you're going on a little tour with one of your caucus colleagues, Ronnie LeBlanc, the MLA for Clare, and also the party's critic for Acadian affairs, La Francophonie, and Fisheries. So what's it been like traveling with him and for the two of you to be hitting different parts of Cape Breton in this particular go-around?
Well, it's great traveling with Ronnie. We're very compatible. We're caucus mates. We sit next to each other in caucus, so we're quite comfortable with one another. And it's really important, I think, for us as Cape Breton MLAs to expose the other provincial MLAs in our party to the issues and the things that are happening in Cape Breton. And we've been focused on that over the last number of months. We've had last week we had Braden Clark in housing and public works critic. We had him in for some meetings and some traveling around. We've had Brendan McGuire. We've had the leader over a number of times, and our focus will be to try and get every Liberal MLA into Cape Breton to see what we're all about over the next couple of years.
Now, I want to pick up on Braden Clark, the housing critic, because obviously I don't need to tell you that housing is a great concern, not just in your neck of the woods in the CBRM, but it's also been a top priority here in the Strait for Richmond County and the town of Port Hawkesbury. What's your sense on how he and the party are viewing the housing situation here in Cape Breton?
Well, of course, we recognize that housing is in a bit of a crisis, not only in Cape Breton, but across the province, and the fact that we really need more supply in order to accommodate the needs. And when you look at public housing, Cape Breton, I believe, has around 3,000 units, which is a significant number of units. We probably have one of the largest housing employee bases in all of the province. But we still have significant wait lists. We have 2-year wait lists plus, so it was important for Braden to come to Cape Breton, and we managed to have a little town hall meeting with some seniors in a housing development, Cape Breton housing development, and for him to hear firsthand about what they love about housing, what they could see as some improvements around housing. But for the most part, just to connect with people and find out what the challenges are. I think it was, he left the island very excited and pumped about his role and the ability to actually come outside and talk to others. But I think he learned a lot too.
All right, well, we'll hope for the best there coming out of those discussions. You are the Liberal Caucus chair, as we've mentioned earlier, so you've gotten to preside over the legislature session just passed. What can you tell me about the general tone of the session? We saw a budget passed. You as finance critic has some concerns about that. What can you tell me about basically not only where the party is, but also where the three parties seem to be in terms of jockeying for a position in the spring legislature session?
This budget was billed as a healthcare budget, with record amounts of dollars being spent on this budget. What we're having a problem with is we're not seeing the outcome, so we're not seeing the deliverables from the budget. And there were many things that were missing from this budget. Help for average Nova Scotians, help with income taxes, help with gas taxes, all of things that we proposed in the spring session. The big piece that I was concerned about from this budget was the fact that we're going to saddle our children and our children's children with $5.6 billion in debt over the term of this budget, from $16 billion to $22 billion by the end of this government's fiscal responsibility. And what we see is significant forecasts of deficit spending. And the last year of the mandate, they're showing a budgeted deficit spending of $610 million just in 1 year alone. So that's very alarming, and we're not against spending, but spending with a plan. So we're not seeing those plans. This government spent over $1 billion outside of the legislative chamber. All parties have done that in the past, but never to the extent that we've seen from this government. $500 million in March alone, which tells me that at the end of the day, they really didn't understand where their budget was going to be. They were projecting a deficit. I believe they realized that they were probably going to have a surplus and had to get $500 million out the door in the last 2 weeks of March, which whenever you're doing that in a panic spend, I'm not sure the best decisions are being made for the province at that point.
March Madness meaning more things than one at that point, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this March Madness was, there's always going to be a little bit of year-end spending as people don't spend their full budgets, but this one was March Madness on steroids, if you'd want to use that term. But I think it was a very significant eye-opener for a lot of Nova Scotians.
Now, Premier Houston and the Finance Minister, Inverness MLA Alan McMaster, have each said that it's worth going into more debt to be able to deal with the healthcare issues that are plaguing the province. That going back to the Premier's campaign slogan, the whole fix healthcare idea. Now, that being said, you've been critical of the idea that the spending is going out in the Department of Health and Wellness, but that it doesn't seem to have any specific direction to it. Can you tell us a little more about your concern there?
Well, you know, when we look at the record spend in healthcare, and we all want healthcare to be better. There's no question about that. But when we look at the metrics that this government ran on, so just this week, the latest wait for a doctor list came out. It's now at 148,000 people. The current government, when in opposition, were indicating it was a crisis at 40,000, and it was a catastrophe at 70,000. So now it's more than doubled, and the list isn't as important as it used to be. Surgical wait times. You know, we were promised 24/7 surgeries. We're nowhere near that. We were promised within 18 months to get to the national benchmark for surgeries in this province. We're nowhere near that mark. We hear more potential for private organizations in the mix, which is always worrisome. So, I think, to my point, spending is wonderful if you can increase the metrics. We look at the bonus structure that was just put out on the 14th of March. A person had to be employed by the 31st of March, so they had 2 weeks to get in under this bonus structure. And, I think what the government did here was they wanted to get $300 million out the door. They wanted to, they billed it as a retention bonus. But what happened is they actually angered a lot of employees as well, because it wasn't clear how you became eligible. I had one nurse who contacted me among many, but this one sticks out, who came back from retirement because the province was pleading nurses, please come back from retirement, working full-time hours. The job status is casual because they're on pension, doesn't qualify. People that were off sick, off injured for no fault of their own, going to go back, didn't qualify. Those that were off on pregnancy leave got the bonus, and it messed up their EI claims for pregnancy. So there was a lot of things that weren't well thought through. And the fact that occupations were segregated based on bonuses. So there was 10,000 for one group, 5,000 for another group. It just didn't seem like a fair mix. And so we're hearing from a lot of disgruntled health employees. One of the things that when you looked at over the years of some of the issues in healthcare, a lot of nurses especially were talking about working conditions. So a retention bonus is great. It's money in your pocket, of which a lot goes for income taxes and puts you into the next tax bracket. But it doesn't do anything to address those working conditions of, can I take my vacation? Can I get a day off to attend my son or daughter's graduation? Can I take time when I deserve it and when I need it? So a lot of these things are not having the effect that we would all hope to make our workforce happier and more healthy.
I have a feeling that we could have an entire conversation strictly on healthcare and about the different things that are plaguing healthcare here in Nova Scotia.
For sure.
But I do want to shift focus a little bit, and the timing of our interview is interesting because only a few hours before you and I sat down, your party held a press conference regarding the carbon tax that is going to be imposed here in Nova Scotia on July the 1st. And I know in a previous conversation you and I had, you identified this as the PC carbon tax, even though it's being applied by the federal government. Your thoughts about all of this and the fact that we're going to see gas prices go up in such a steep hike on July the 1st?
Well, the unfortunate thing, I believe, Adam, for Nova Scotians, is that the Houston government has chosen to politicize the carbon tax for their benefit politically. A short-term benefit that so that they can They can talk about the liberal carbon tax. They can talk about the carbon tax that is not, they don't say federal, they say liberal. So they're trying to get those political points in. When in actual fact, this carbon tax has been law since 2017. The previous Liberal government helped Nova Scotians avoid that tax by doing the right thing and negotiating with the federal government on the cap and trade system. And this system added 1 cent per litre. And it raised over $100 million through other forms of taxation on polluters, which didn't affect the public. $100 million in the Green Fund, which then could be used to help Nova Scotia achieve a better carbon footprint. The cap and trade system set to expire. So instead of the Houston government renegotiating with the federal government a new type of cap and trade system, which would maybe add 2 cents to the gas taxes, they decide to take the stance. And if you'll remember back from our previous interview, I believe I spoke about the fact that, you know, they talk about sending in their proposals, but I'm not sure they actually did the work. You know, we've been asking them in the legislature, please do the work, please get on a plane, please go to Ottawa, work with the energy minister nationally and figure this thing out. Nova Scotians at this time, they don't need 14 cents per litre on top of gasoline. People are struggling with rent, they're struggling with the cost of food, they're struggling with heating oil, they're struggling with all kinds of things. We're in an inflationary period. So this unnecessary 14 cents on top of what we're paying for gasoline now is shameful. And it's shameful that this government did not do the work required and make that happen for Nova Scotians. So now we're kind of shifting gears and we're calling it the Houston carbon tax. Because really that's what it is. It's a tax that's going to affect Nova Scotians, and it's because this provincial government did not do their job and negotiate a better deal on behalf of Nova Scotians. And it's very unfortunate that we've chosen to politicize the issue provincially in order to gain political points when the average everyday Nova Scotian is suffering. And we tried to, in this last session, we tried to push the government to put measures in that would help Nova Scotians deal with the cost of living. We put a bill on the floor that would freeze the motor fuel tax for Nova Scotians until December 24, which would have saved 14 cents alone. We put a bill on the floor to index income tax brackets. We're the only province in Canada that doesn't index, with the exception of PEI, so us and PEI, that don't index income tax brackets, costing thousands of dollars for Nova Scotians every year. As their income grows, they pay significantly more taxes. And finally, we asked this government to come up with a universal lunch program for schools, which would take a significant burden off of parents when it comes to providing healthy lunches for their kids. So all three of those ideas, and you know, we don't want to just criticize for the sake of criticizing, but when you put solutions forward that get ignored because they want, don't kid yourself, the Houston government wants this tax. They want this tax on Nova Scotians because they can then blame it on the federal Liberals and the provincial Liberals for not doing anything. There were many opportunities for them to make change that they didn't do.
And we note that the deadline for coming up with a provincial proposal was August 31st of last year. And with only a few days remaining before that deadline, that was when the Houston government came up with what they described as better than a carbon tax. And we saw the result there. The federal government went ahead and said, no, that's not enough. We're going to go ahead with the imposition of the carbon tax. Do you get the sense that this is more of an ideological or political disagreement than it is an economic one, or one based on actually reducing the carbon footprint? Is this all politics?
I believe it is all politics. And, you know, we realize how important protecting the environment is. If we just look back a number of months to Fiona, which played havoc on Cape Breton in particular, And now we look at the wildfires that are happening in other parts of Nova Scotia because of the change in the climate and the lack of precipitation. It's so important that we put measures in place to protect our environment. And we could do those things without affecting Nova Scotians at the pocketbook. You know, it's not that difficult to do. Just do the negotiation, do the work, and put some measures in place that will offset these costs for carbon protection. You know, and I think that's what we're missing at this point, is we're missing true leadership and doing what's right. You know, Stephen McNeil, I remember, used a line, he didn't govern to get elected. He got elected because he governed. And I think the Houston government could take a page out of that book and start to govern properly for the citizens of Nova Scotia, as opposed to political gain for the future.
Well, let's finish on that point to a degree and talk about party politics and where the Liberal Party of Nova Scotia is now. It's almost the halfway point in a 4-year term that began in August of 2021. You were elected at that point. You were one of several new Liberal MLAs elected to that caucus. Now there's a new leader, Zach Churchill, of course. And recent poll out of Narrative Research, their quarterly poll, suggested that the Liberal Party is up in the polls, now at 31%, just 8 points shy of the governing PCs. What's your sense as caucus chair, but again, as one of these newer Liberal MLAs, as to the spirit of the party going forward, and whether you're making those connections with voters that might not have been made in the run-up to the election that resulted in the defeat of the Liberal government?
Well, you know, I think the defeat in 2021, it gave us as a party an opportunity to look inside, you know, to rebrand, to relook at things. We have a new leader. Ian was a great leader. And I think that at that time, clearly, Nova Scotians were ready for a change. I think now we have that opportunity to, with a new leadership in place. We've got 16 strong MLAs. We have a by-election coming up in Preston.
Yes.
The mood is great in our caucus. We're all working hard. We're all working together. You know, and there's some new voices at the table that are adding, in my opinion, adding to the team. And I think the future looks bright, you know, and I think in Cape Breton, people are resonating with our ideas. We're trying to provide solutions that would work, while at the same time holding the current government to account, which is our job. You know, we have to point out that we're now at 148,000 on the doctor wait list, but we're also providing solutions as you know, what can we do to help people in their pocketbook. So I think it's a fine line between criticizing and providing alternative solutions, and I think we're doing a good job of that right now. And the fact that the poll results are showing you know, a little increase there for us is good, because we're not firing on all cylinders yet. We're still working through our team. Zach is a new leader. Zach is now spending time on the road, and it's going to be important for Nova Scotians to get to know Zach as a leader of a party, as opposed to as a minister of a previous administration. And you know, Zach is very, very charismatic. He really cares about Nova Scotia, and I'm very happy and positive about the future over the next number of years. And I think that we will continue to grow, and I think we'll continue to build our momentum up to the next election.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in just a short time here, Fred, as I thought we might. Did you have anything else you wanted to add about any of this just before we wrap up?
No, I think, you know, I'm very happy to be here, and I love our discussions, and your questioning is always bang on and very, very, very thorough, and I really, truly appreciate that. And also I wanted to give a shout out to my colleague Ronnie LeBlanc, and to thank him for taking time out of his schedule. I know how busy he is, and we all are, to come to Cape Breton and hear about the you know, the issues that fishers and francophones are having on this island, so that when we go back to our meetings, we can help to formulate policy, and we can help to formulate platform going forward. So a big thank you to Ronnie, and I look forward to the next couple of days. We're going to do some stops in Cheticamp, and then in Sydney, and then out to Lewisburg, and then Ronnie will be making his way back through Richmond County on his way home.
Well, we wish you both safe travels, and in the meantime, it's just nice to be able to speak to you face to face as opposed to through a computer screen. So thank you so much, Fred Tilley, for dropping by Telile Community Television today.
Thanks so much, Adam.
Fred Tilley is the Liberal Party's finance critic and also its caucus chair and the MLA for Northside-Westmount. Coming up this summer on Telile Community Television, stay tuned for a special studio interview featuring Nova Scotia Premier Tim Houston and Richmond PC MLA Trevor Boudreau. We'll also have a studio interview with the leader of the Nova Scotia Liberal Party and the official opposition leader for Nova Scotia, Zach Churchill. And there you have it. That wraps up this week's edition of Roundtable here on Telile Community Television. Thank you for tuning in, and a big thank you to our interview guests this week, Nova Scotia Liberal MLAs Fred Tilley and Ronnie LeBlanc. If you have any thoughts about what you've seen over the past hour here on Roundtable, or you'd just like to make some suggestions for a future edition of the show, I'd love to hear them. You can contact me directly. My phone number is 902-625-8863, and you can reach me by email using the address adamjrcook, cook with an E, @gmail.com. You can also contact Telile Community Television directly with your ideas and your commentary. The station phone number in Arichat is 902-226-1928, and the best email address to use is telile@telile.tv. Don't forget to follow Telile on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, and our Telile YouTube channel features every single episode of Roundtable, including this one, as well as individual interview segments and panel discussions from our shows, and we offer the same service for our sister program, Telile 24/7. For now, I'm Adam Cook. Thank you once again for joining me for a new edition of Roundtable. I look forward to seeing you again next week with a brand new show. Bye for now.